The sirens blared as Karen's massive SUV blocked the fire hydrant. But the firefighters were having none of it. With a thunderous roar, they plowed right through the luxury vehicle, sending twisted metal and shattered glass flying. Karen's horrified scream pierced the chaos as she watched her prized possession reduced to rubble. This was no ordinary parking dispute. It was the beginning of an all-out war. Karen's manicured hands trembled as she surveyed the wreckage of her beloved Escalade. The firefighters' trucks had left it a twisted, smoking ruin, the once gleaming chrome and tinted windows now mangled beyond recognition. How dare they treat her property with such disregard? This was unacceptable. Gritting her teeth, she marched up to the nearest firefighter, her designer heels clicking with each furious step. You destroyed my car," she shrieked, drawing the attention of the gathered crowd. "Do you have any idea how much that cost? This is an outrage." The firefighter, a burly man with a stoic expression, turned to face her. "Ma'am, you were blocking a fire hydrant. We had no choice but to remove your vehicle. It's the law." "The law?" Karen scoffed, her face flushing with indignation. "I'm the one who makes the rules around here. You have no right to just steamroll my property like that." The firefighters sighed, already weary of her entitled tirade. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but you need to move your vehicle immediately. This is an emergency situation." Karen opened her mouth to argue further, but a sudden commotion from nearby drew her attention. A group of her neighbors had gathered, whispering and pointing in her direction. "Can you believe she did that?" One woman muttered to another. "Blocking the fire hydrant. What an absolute nightmare." Karen's eyes narrowed, her nails digging into the palms of her hands. How dare they judge her? Didn't they understand who she was? She was the president of the Homeowners Association, the arbiter of all things proper and acceptable in this neighborhood. These peasants had no right to criticize her actions. Squaring her shoulders, Karen marched over to the gossiping group, her gaze burning with barely contained fury. "All of you, mind your own business," she snapped. "This is my property, and I'll do with it as I please. If you have a problem with that, you can take it up with me at the next HOA meeting." The neighbors fell silent, their expressions a mix of surprise and unease. Karen allowed herself a self-satisfied smirk. They may have won this round, but she was far from done. These firefighters would pay for their insolence, and her neighbors would learn to respect her authority. This was just the beginning of a war she was determined to win. Karen's car was towed away, and the fire department was finally able to access the hydrant. As the last of the firefighters packed up their equipment and headed back to the station, Karen stood on her manicured lawn, seething with rage. How dare they defy her like that? Didn't they know who she was? She was the president of the Homeowners Association. Her word was law in this neighborhood. And yet, those lowly firefighters had the audacity to destroy her property without a second thought. Well, she wouldn't stand for it. This was an outrage, an affront to her authority, and she was determined to make them pay. Marching back into her house, Karen grabbed her phone and began dialing furiously. She had friends in high places, connections that would allow her to bring the full force of the law down on those arrogant firefighters. They would regret the day they crossed her. "Hello, this is Karen Wilkins, the president of the Homeowners Association," she said in a sickeningly sweet tone. "I need to report an incident of property damage and excessive force by the fire department. Yes, it's quite serious. I demand that an investigation be launched immediately." As she listened to the response on the other end of the line, Karen's lips curled into a satisfied smile. The wheels were in motion, and soon those firefighters would be sorry they ever dared to defy her. Meanwhile, the firefighters were gathered in the station, discussing the incident. "Can you believe the nerve of that woman?" said the burly firefighter who had confronted Karen. "Blocking a fire hydrant like that, and then acting all high and mighty when we had to remove her car." His colleague, a young woman with a no-nonsense expression, nodded grimly. Yeah, and now she's calling in some sort of complaint. As if we had a choice. We were just doing our job, and she decides to make it a federal case. The firefighters exchange worried glances. They knew how powerful and connected Karen was in the community, and they feared that her retaliation could have serious consequences. But they also knew that they had done the right thing, and they weren't about to back down without a fight. Well, if she wants a war, then we'll give her one. The burly firefighter growled, clenching his fist. Nobody messes with the fire department and gets away with it. The next morning, Karen woke up with a triumphant grin on her face. She had spent the better part of the night coordinating with her powerful connections, and she was confident that the firefighters would soon be facing the consequences of their actions. Strutting into the kitchen, she poured herself a cup of freshly brewed coffee, savoring the rich aroma. As she sipped the steaming liquid, she glanced out the window, her eyes scanning the neighborhood. There, standing on the sidewalk, were the firefighters from yesterday, their faces etched with concern. Karen couldn't help but chuckle. They were clearly worried about the repercussions of their little stunt. Turning away from the window, Karen headed for the front door, determined to confront them head-on. She needed to make it clear that she was in charge, and that they had better not cross her again. As she stepped outside, the firefighters turned to face her, their expressions guarded. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Karen asked, her voice dripping with false sweetness. The burly firefighter cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "Ms. Wilkins, we've been informed that you filed a complaint against us. We just wanted to come by and try to resolve this situation amicably." Karen's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a smug smile. "Amicably? You destroyed my property, and you think a simple apology is going to make it all better?" She scoffed. "I don't think so. You're going to pay for what you've done, and you're going to pay dearly." The firefighters exchanged uneasy glances, their faces etched with concern. "Look, Ms. Wilkins, we were just doing our job. We had no choice but to move your vehicle. It was blocking a fire hydrant, and that's against the law." "The law?" Karen sneered, her voice dripping with disdain. "I am the law around here, and you do well to remember that. I've already set the wheels in motion, and let me tell you, you're not going to like the consequences." With that, she turned on her heel and strode back into her house, slamming the door behind her. The firefighters were left standing on the sidewalk, their expressions a mix of confusion and dread. They knew that they were in for a fight, and they weren't sure if they were ready to take on the formidable Karen Wilkins. News of the confrontation between Karen and the firefighters spread like wildfire through the neighborhood. The residents, who had long been frustrated by Karen's high-handed behavior, were delighted to see someone stand up to her. "It's about time someone put that woman in her place," one neighbor whispered to another as they watched the firefighters depart. But Karen was not about to let the matter rest. She had spent the morning making calls and pulling strings, and she was confident that the firefighters would soon be facing serious consequences. Later that day, the doorbell rang, and Karen opened the door to find a team of city inspectors standing on her doorstep. "Mrs. Wilkins, we've received a complaint about a fire code violation on your property," the lead inspector announced, his tone businesslike. Karen's eyes narrowed, and she folded her arms across her chest. "A fire code violation? What are you talking about?" The inspector consulted his clipboard. "It seems your landscaping has encroached on the fire hydrant access, preventing the fire department from being able to use it in an emergency. We'll need to issue a citation and order you to correct the issue within 30 days. Karen's face flushed with anger. "This is outrageous. I've never heard of any such violation, and I certainly didn't authorize any landscaping work that would interfere with the fire hydrant. This is clearly retaliation for the incident yesterday." The inspector shrugged, unperturbed by her outburst. "Be that as it may, the violation is real, and you'll need to address it or face further penalties. Good day, ma'am." With that, the inspectors turned and left, leaving Karen seething with rage. She knew exactly who was behind this, and she was determined to make them pay. Grabbing her phone, she began dialing furiously, her fingers trembling with fury. Hello? Mayor's office. This is Karen Wilkins, the president of the Homeowners Association. I need to speak to the mayor immediately. There's been an outrageous abuse of power, and I won't stand for it. The firefighters, meanwhile, had gathered at the station, still reeling from their confrontation with Karen. I can't believe she's taking this to the mayor's office, the young female firefighter said, shaking her head. This is going to get ugly. The burly firefighter clenched his fist, his expression grim. Well, if that's how she wants to play it, then we'll be ready. Nobody messes with the fire department and gets away with it. The mayor's office was buzzing with activity as Karen Wilkins stormed in, her designer handbag swinging on her arm. She demanded an immediate audience with the mayor, her shrill voice carrying through the corridors. The mayor, a seasoned politician with a keen eye for public relations, knew better than to ignore Karen's demands. He quickly ushered her into his private office, where she wasted no time in launching into her tirade. Mayor, this is an outrage, Karen exclaimed, her perfectly manicured nails tapping on the polished mahogany desk. The fire department has retaliated against me by filing a bogus code violation on my property, and I demand that you put a stop to it immediately. The mayor leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowed in concern. Now, Karen, let's not jump to any conclusions. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation for this. Why don't you tell me exactly what happened? Karen proceeded to recount the incident with the fire hydrant, her voice dripping with indignation. She described how the firefighters had callously destroyed her prized Escalade, and how she had dared to stand up to their arrogance. And now they're trying to punish me by claiming that my landscaping is interfering with the fire hydrant. She fumed. This is clearly a vendetta, and I want it stopped. You need to reprimand those firefighters and remove the citation immediately. The mayor listened intently, his expression neutral. He knew that Karen was a powerful force in the community, but he also had to consider the potential backlash from the public if he were to side with her against the fire department. I understand your concerns, Karen, he said slowly. But the fire department is an essential service, and they have a duty to ensure that all fire hydrants are accessible in case of an emergency. If there is a legitimate code violation, then we need to address it. Karen's eyes narrowed, and her lips pressed into a thin line. So you're taking their side? She hissed. I'm the president of the Homeowners Association, and I demand that you intervene on my behalf. The mayor held up a placating hand. Now, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'll look into this matter further, but I can't simply ignore a legitimate code violation. I'm sorry, Karen, but you'll have to work with the fire department to resolve this issue. Karen's face flushed with rage, and she slammed her fist on the desk. This isn't over, Mayor, she snarled, before turning on her heel and storming out of the office. The firefighters, meanwhile, watched the drama unfold from a distance, their expressions a mix of relief and trepidation. Well, at least the mayor didn't side with her, the young female firefighter remarked. For now, the burly firefighter replied grimly. But we all know that Karen Wilkins isn't the type to give up that easily. Karen was seething with rage as she drove home from the mayor's office. How dare he side with those arrogant firefighters over her? She was the president of the Homeowners Association, the most influential person in the entire neighborhood. She should have been able to get the citation removed with a single phone call. But the mayor had refused to budge, and now she was faced with the humiliating prospect of having to work with the fire department to resolve the code violation on her property. It was an unacceptable compromise, and she was determined to find a way to turn the tables on her adversaries. As she pulled into her driveway, an idea began to take shape in her mind. If the firefighters wanted to play hardball, then she would show them exactly what they were up against. She would rally the other members of the Homeowners Association to her cause, and together they would make the fire department's life a living hell. Storming into her house, Karen immediately began making phone calls, her voice dripping with false sweetness as she outlined her plan to her fellow HOA members. One by one, they agreed to join her crusade, eager to assert their collective power over the unruly firefighters. The next day, the fire department received a summons to attend a special meeting of the Homeowners Association. When the firefighters arrived, they were greeted by a sea of angry faces, all of them glaring at them with undisguised hostility. "What is the meaning of this?" the burly firefighter demanded, his brow furrowed in confusion. Karen, seated at the head of the table, rose to her feet, her expression triumphant. "Gentlemen, we're here today to discuss your blatant disregard for the rules and regulations of our community," she declared, her voice cutting through the tense silence. "This citation you've issued against me is nothing more than a petty act of retaliation, and we won't stand for it." The firefighters exchanged uneasy glances, suddenly feeling as if they were facing an entire army of Karens. "Ma'am, we're simply doing our job to ensure the safety of this neighborhood," the young female firefighter replied, her voice calm and measured. "If there's a legitimate code violation, then we have a duty to address it." "Legitimate code violation?" Karen scoffed, her lips curling into a sneer. "That's nothing more than a convenient excuse to harass me. And we've decided that we're not going to let you get away with it." The other HOA members murmured in agreement, their expressions dark and determined. The firefighters suddenly realized that they were in for a fight, and they braced themselves for the battle ahead. The tension in the room was palpable as the Homeowners Association members, led by the ever-formidable Karen Wilkins, confronted the firefighters. The firefighters, outnumbered and outmatched, knew they were in for a tough battle. "So, what exactly are you proposing, Ms. Wilkins?" the burly firefighter asked, his voice betraying a hint of weariness. Karen's lips curled into a triumphant smile as she addressed the room. "We, the members of the Homeowners Association, have decided that this citation you've issued is completely unacceptable. It's clear that this is nothing more than a petty act of retaliation, and we won't stand for it." The other HOA members nodded in agreement, their expressions a mix of indignation and determination. "We demand that you immediately rescind this citation and issue a formal apology," Karen continued, her tone brooking no dissent. "And if you refuse, we will take matters into our own hands." The firefighters exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to respond. They knew that Karen and her cronies held a significant amount of sway in the community, and they couldn't afford to antagonize them further. "Ms. Wilkins, I understand your concerns, but the citation is valid," the young female firefighter said, her voice steady. "We have a duty to ensure the safety of this neighborhood, and that includes maintaining clear access to the fire hydrants." Karen's eyes narrowed, and her expression hardened. "So you're telling us that you're not willing to back down, that you're going to continue to harass us and disrupt our lives?" The burly firefighter sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "Look, we're not trying to make your lives difficult. We're just doing our job. But if you have an issue with the citation, you're welcome to appeal it through the proper channels." Karen scoffed, her disdain for the firefighters palpable. "Appeal it? You must be joking. We are the proper channels, and we're telling you right now that this citation is unacceptable." The HOA members murmured in agreement, their expressions growing increasingly hostile. The firefighters knew they were outmatched, but they also knew that they couldn't simply give in to Karen's demands. They had a responsibility to uphold the law, no matter how inconvenient it might be for the powerful members of the Homeowners Association. "I'm sorry, Ms. Wilkins, but we can't simply ignore the code violation. If you want to appeal it, you'll have to go through the proper legal channels," the burly firefighter said, his voice firm. Karen's face flushed with rage, and she slammed her fist on the table. "Then so be it," she hissed. "This isn't over, not by a long shot." The firefighters knew that they were in for a fight, and they braced themselves for the fallout. The confrontation between the Homeowners Association and the fire department only escalated in the days that followed. Karen Wilkins, fueled by her unwavering sense of entitlement and her thirst for power, set out to make the firefighters' lives a living hell. First, she rallied the other HOA members to bombard the city council with complaints and demands, flooding their inboxes with angry missives and vowing to withhold their tax payments until the citation was rescinded. The council, wary of angering such a powerful and influential group, found themselves caught in the middle of the conflict, unsure of how to proceed. Next, Karen orchestrated a whisper campaign, spreading rumors and lies about the firefighters' conduct and competence. She painted them as reckless, unprofessional, and even corrupt, preying on the fears and prejudices of her neighbors. The once respected fire department suddenly found themselves viewed with suspicion and distrust by the very community they had sworn to protect. But Karen wasn't done. Determined to escalate the conflict even further, she began to actively sabotage the firefighters' efforts to maintain the hydrants and other emergency infrastructure in the neighborhood. Her henchmen would mysteriously forget to clear the hydrants of snow and debris, or would even go so far as to tamper with the equipment, ensuring that it was inoperable when the firefighters needed it most. The firefighters, despite their best efforts to remain professional and above the fray, found themselves increasingly frustrated and demoralized. Their attempts to appeal the citation through official channels were routinely stonewalled, and their pleas for understanding and cooperation from the Homeowners Association fell on deaf ears. Finally, in a last-ditch effort to regain control of the situation, the fire department decided to take a bold stand. They gathered their forces and, one fateful night, descended upon Karen Wilkins' property with a formidable show of strength. The sound of sirens and the rumble of engines pierced the night as the firefighters surrounded the sprawling estate, their faces set with determination. Karen, awakened from her slumber by the commotion, rushed outside, her eyes widening in horror as she realized what was happening. "What is the meaning of this?" she shrieked, her voice shrill with panic. The burly firefighter, his expression grim, stepped forward, his voice booming with authority. "Ms. Wilkins, we've had enough of your games. This citation is valid, and we're here to ensure that the fire hydrant on your property is accessible and functioning properly." Karen's face flushed with rage, and she opened her mouth to protest, but the firefighter raised a hand, silencing her. "If you continue to interfere with our duties, we'll have no choice but to take legal action. This isn't about petty squabbles or power plays. It's about the safety of this entire community, and we're not going to let you jeopardize that, no matter how powerful you think you are." The crowd of neighbors, drawn by the commotion, watched in stunned silence as the firefighters set to work, their movements swift and efficient. Karen, her mouth agape, could only watch in helpless fury as her carefully constructed web of control began to unravel before her eyes. In the end, the firefighters completed their task, leaving behind a restored and fully functional fire hydrant. As they departed, the burly firefighter turned to Karen, his expression stern. "This isn't over, Ms. Wilkins, but we'll be keeping a close eye on you from now on. Don't even think about trying anything like this again." Karen, her pride and authority shattered, could only stand and watch as the fire trucks disappeared into the night, their sirens fading into the distance. It was a humiliating defeat, one that would haunt her for a long time to come.